smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditties. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to run. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz back in the house, and I have a returning guest in the house, Trevor Harrison, and we're going to do some poem reading today. That's right, he has two incredible new books that he has just released, and we're going to do some poem reading. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz works. Get over to Miss Liz's platforms, Spotify, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, all of those good platforms. Give those a like, follow, and subscribe, and pass these tea times along because they do make a difference for the guests and for people who resonate with these stories that come to tea time. So let's get started with disclaimer and then an intro, and then we're going to get Trevor in here and we're going to do some poem reading. So the disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicated to sharing real life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I, Miss Liz, is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decisions that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require any professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcome you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, good afternoon, my beautiful listeners out there, and welcome back to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where words are given space to breathe. Today, I'm honored to welcome back returning guest Trevor Wesley Harrison, poet, scholar, and lifelong observer of the human journey. Born in Edmonton, Alberta, Trevor has spent decades as a professor of sociology at the University of Lethbridge and has held notable academic positions across Canada and internationally. A recipient of distinguished research awards, his work has shaped conversations far beyond the university. But this afternoon, we gather not around the scholarships, we gather around poetry. Trevor returns to read from his two newest poetry collections, War and Other Inconveniencies, and Poetry Without Borders, work that explores humanity, conflict, reflection, and the invisible lines that shape our lives. I want to welcome Trevor back to Tea Time, and we're grateful to share this space with you again. So let me get Trevor in here and let's spill some tea and get some poems out.
Good afternoon, Liz. So nice to be back here again. I was really looking forward to it.
I am so glad to have returning guests because then it means I'm doing something right.
Exactly.
So, Trevor, before we get into the poem reading, could you share a little bit with the guests who are first-time listeners today about who you are and who you were as a little guy and who you are now?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. which is a fairly northern city in Alberta, the capital of the province, actually. After that, I traveled a fair amount when I was younger, and eventually went to university where I got a doctorate in sociology, specializing really in political sociology. And so I've written a lot of books actually in kind of academic ways on culture, politics, economics, and whatnot. But along the way, I also traveled a fair amount, and so some of the works have also come out of that. I retired not quite 3 years ago now. I still occasionally will do some academic work, conversations, presentations, but I've opened up kind of a second career here, or gone back to something that was kind of interesting when I was younger, and that was doing a lot of creative writing. So last year I brought out a book of kind of memoirs, stories, Elysian Fields, and so this year I brought out these couple of poetry books. And poetry was something I had begun to write, as many people do, in my teens. Thankfully, I'm not going to read any of those poems to your listeners because they were really bad. And I hope these ones are at least a little bit better. But it's an interesting part of my own personal journey to then migrate from being a professional academic to now working on doing creative writing. And as I said, particularly these two new books of poetry, both of which they're a little bit different, which is why I separated them into two books. The first book is, and I'll just read actually from the introduction, saying that uh, a warning to the reader: these poems bend toward the dark and somber. I'm not opposed to joy, but I would rather walk in the truthful dark than in the false light. And that kind of goes along with how you introduced your show, Liz. The second book is, if not a bit lighter, it's much more introspective and personal in a sense. So it's kind of, rather than looking inwards at something, it's like or looking at something from outside, it's more looking inwards at myself and recollecting things. So anyway, so the two books, War and Other Inconveniences, and Poetry Without Borders. And I hope your listeners will enjoy them.
So, Trevor, out of the two books, which one did you enjoy writing more?
That's really an interesting question. The War and Other Inconveniences is in some sense very contemporary. So it discusses things like environmental change, war, pandemics, that we went through. So it's actually something that came together just in the last few years. The other book, which is split up into different parts, some of the pieces actually, in fact, there's one section called Lost Poems, and they're actually poems that I sort of wrote when I was in my 20s, and then I put them away somewhere and lost them, literally lost them. And then when I was going back, I said, oh, maybe I can fix these up and publish them. So it took place over a much longer period of time. And so it was, in that sense, it was more introspective because you're going back, looking at, in a sense, reflections of who you were at a time, going back 10, 15, 20, 30 years, versus the other book, which is, as I said, very contemporary of the last few years. So, but I enjoyed doing both of them. They were a challenge.
So you give two sides of yourself.
Exactly. And, of course, one of the things with all writing, I think everybody does writing, is you learn more, not just about the techniques of writing. That's an ongoing thing that every day I learn something more, but you also learn something more about yourself as you're actually writing. And that goes actually for even academic writing. So both very challenging, both a good deal fun to write, and now also to read for people.
Well, Trevor, let's get into a couple of poems and then we'll get into some questions and then we'll just bounce around and we'll have some fun today.
Sure. Well, if you like, I will start with the book War and Other Inconveniences. And the first one here is called The Four Horsemen. Of course, we're familiar with the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. The biblical prophets could not decide the number of of the four horsemen: sword or war, conquest and famine, wild beasts and pestilence, and myths named death a cause and not a consequence. But in fairness, keeping track was a Sisyphean task. Similar pale riders mark our time: wars, pandemics, climate change, inequality. But where the old ones worried, we sleep contented by sugar laced foods, booze and drugs, sports and scandal, pornography and pomp. Donald Trump is our avatar. The horsemen watch, patient. They have time.
So when you wrote that one, Trevor, what were you thinking and feeling?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of just the huge weight of things that are actually every day you go on the you check out your iPad, what's the story of the day, and what was horrible yesterday is now replaced by something else. The phrase that's come back to me a few times is, as you open up your iPad, it's kind of like, what fresh hell waiteth me today? Because all of a sudden something that just seemed incredibly horrible and people are, being harmed in some way, and yet the way our media works, it kind of gets scrubbed from the television, and all of a sudden you're on to something else. And it just struck me that the sheer weight of all these things is really pretty overwhelming to have to deal with.
It is. It gets overwhelming, right? And then you just want to get away from it all.
Yeah, and yet to ignore it is not really a solution either. So, but it's a very human thing to say, I just can't handle that right now. So, as I said, some people escape by going into playing games, or unfortunately using alcohol or drugs or whatever else. But again, that's a temporary escape, and it doesn't help us to solve the real problems that we face, even though it's a very understandable kind of desire to want to escape from it.
So, Trevor, how did you get the title for that poem?
Well, it just I don't know. It just came to me, and I like the kind of sardonic wit about it. Right? War, which is pretty bad, and other inconveniences like, oh, that was really bad that there's war going on, but I can go on to watch my latest soap opera or something. I don't know. The title just came to me, and I like the illusion of it just being a kind of wry sense of humor to it.
I like the real rawness of it.
Yeah.
Poetry, that's what it does. It opens up the rawness
Hmm.
of our deeper insides. I know when
Yeah.
I write my poetry, it's the deeper inside that I'm scared to show people sometimes.
Hmm.
Uh, so just expressing words and that. Uh, how does poetry allow you to express what sociology cannot, Trevor?
Yeah, one of the things I mentioned actually in the introduction is, as an academic, to some extent, you're expected to be somewhat dispassionate and to be objective, and just so you're kind of analyzing things as though you were a specialist looking at bugs or something, and you just kind of analyze this bug in this dish in front of you. Um, but one of the things about writing poetry or doing creative writing of other sorts is that you're allowed to use, for example, just adjectives. You can allow your emotional response to things out that as an academic you're quite often dissuaded from actually doing. So I think that's why I enjoy, in now my retirement, being able to give vent to this other side of myself, which is not dispassionate, but is in fact very much personally involved in whatever is happening.
Well, let's jump into the second poem.
Yeah, this one again, this has a certain wry sense of humor to it. This one actually ended up being published in we have a magazine in Alberta called Alberta Views. And so this was published actually a year and a half, 2 years ago now. It's called A Pretty Good Planet. And again, there's a sardonic kind of humor to this one. Everyone agreed that, on the whole, it had been a pretty damn good planet. A few cranky plates and petty eruptions, but every planet is entitled a few indiscretions, and it was a great place to see things tootle about, make love and war, invent things, some even useful, write stories, sing songs, paint paintings, eat and drink too much, sleep it off, and start again. Yes, it had been a pretty good planet until the ether turned fire and ash.
So, Trevor, make love, not war. What do you get from that quote?
Well, it's actually make love and war, and that's
And
the
war. Oh,
yeah, and
so you
that's
want both.
well, and unfortunately, as human beings, we tend also towards the war part as much as making love, and so that's the double-edged sword of human beings is that we can be very creative and loving and concerned about each other, but we can also be pretty horrible towards each other, and pretty horrible, as this poem suggests, towards the planet itself and all kinds of living things on it, trees, animals, whatever. So
Well, let's jump into the next one, the pandemic.
sure. So this one was this a reasonably long one, but again, there's a kind of sardonic wit to it. I think this is actually describing the pandemic, and this one, to some extent, I started writing and thinking about taking notes while the pandemic was really happening, beginning in 2020. So the pandemic. At first, nothing changed. Death, it seemed, had found in China a comfortable home in which to settle. And in any case, it was just the flu. Said, and so the West's good men and good people, good women, went about their lives, leaving to work, to return, and sleep again. Strange tales were told of the dead and dying littering Roman streets. But these, it was noted, were the old and infirm, or those who embraced, as Italians are wont to do, and thus hugged death. The good people did not die until they did. The months dissolved, the graph lines of unemployment and death went vertical. The shopping lines at Walmart and Costco went horizontal. Market sellers sought an edge. Experts and politicians held briefings. The media conjured fear, blame, and spectacle. Modernity's ceaseless need for novelty collapsed into sameness. This pandemic gave no hint of its plans, and hope was a poor predictor. The countless waves washed away our comfortable lives. 2 years in exile, the good people wandered, seeking answers for the vanished life. Some few discovered in places long forgot and others never visited, simple pleasures of quietude in music and books, board games and walks. Others mourned their lost imagined selves, and guarding the darkening space, made offerings that the old gods should return. So it's kind of like describing all the emotions of how we, over the first 2 years of the pandemic, tried to process what was happening. This strange thing that had suddenly descended on us, right, around the world. So yeah.
Well, it was like this dark cloud of, like you called the hug death, right?
Yeah.
We didn't know what was coming.
And that's what's so phenomenally was scary about it. It was like this thing that's unseen, and we don't quite have a handle of how did it start. And you could see people starting to blame others for it, or saying that some mischievous scientist someplace had created this thing, and it just went on from there as fear and despair and anger kind of gripped people over those couple of years until eventually we got the injections, that were able to start to deal with it, and things settled down. But the first 2 years was genuinely scary for a lot of people.
Trevor, you weren't retired yet when the pandemic hit, correct?
No. But it was an interesting time because what it meant was we had to change everything around in terms of teaching. So all of a sudden, instead of having person-to-person meetings with people and teaching in large classrooms, we suddenly had to start Zooming. And that required a whole change of your teaching style of the technology around it, getting students up to speed on how we were going to do this, changing how you would mark and grade and everything. So yeah, I was very much involved with this for the first 2 years and really into the third year of it.
And since the pandemic, how have you seen the education systems change?
Yeah, well, there's a few things happened. One, because a lot of people started to work at home in all kinds of occupations, in public services and everything else, that actually kind of continued in academia, so that, once people get used to doing things a certain way, it's hard to change it again. The fact was, a lot of us were already starting to work a lot at home anyway. You have your computer in your office or whatever. That just kind of accelerated things. And then the other thing was, because of the new technologies and online learning, these things were happening and maybe going to happen anyway, but it speeded up that whole process. And also for a lot of students, I think they also came to like the convenience and the ease of staying in their residence and taking lots of classes. So it the changes in some sense were permanent or semi-permanent, brought about by the pandemic for sure.
Absolutely. And we need to keep talking about it because it did change and affect many of our lives.
Yeah.
Uh, do you feel that a lot of books were written during that time, Trevor?
Uh, I can't say for sure. I suspect there's a lot of people continue to write, but of course that also changes because we're seeing a move away from paper books to online digital books now. And again, all of this kind of accentuated the changes that were going on there. Uh, One interesting thing I think we will continue to see, and I have to say actually that this one pandemic, this was only the last of about five we've had, going back about 25 years. I mean, there was SARS, there was a whole bunch of them. So this was not the last one. We're going to see more, but maybe, as scientists tell us, we will have learned some lessons about how to deal with the next ones. But there will be other pandemics we'll hit.
Yeah.
So, um, but in terms of publishing, I think one of the things I'm expecting is we're going to see books coming out about the pandemic, maybe for the next 10 years still. Like, there's not been yet, as far as I know, a really conclusive book that talks about all the aspects of what happened around the world or in specific countries or happened to specific classes of people or whatever. That story remains to be told. And it's also a story that remains to be told among literary writers. I mean, imagine now that you're going to write a story that is taking place in 2025 of some family growing up during this past few years. Well, to be really accurate at all, you're going to have to say something probably about how this pandemic affected that family. So it's also going to change, I think, literary works around this as well.
Yeah, I hope there's a good book that comes out about it soon. Like all the statistics, the correct statistics, not the
Yeah.
misinformation, right?
Yeah.
Give us some truth. Give us some good stuff.
Yeah.
So let's jump in. Let's jump into the next poem, Trevor, called "This Age."
Was it This Age, or let me just find that one. I had Hollywood Signs on here, but maybe that's a different one.
Oh, I have Hollywood Heroes.
Hollywood, that's it. Hollywood here. Oh, where is that one? Hollywood Heroes. Yes, there it is. 55. I just need to find that page. I thought I was prepared. Okay, Hollywood Heroes. This one actually rhymes. Some of my poems don't, but this one actually does. Stuart went to Washington. Fonda stood alone. Cooper faced a gang of thugs to save a cowboy town. Hollywood's brave heroes stand against the throng, risking death to fight the fight against a mighty wrong. But history tells us differently, romantic lies aside. When courage comes a calling, lone wolves run and hide.
I like that one because it rhymes. And I'm like you. Some of my poems don't rhyme either.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, "That's not poetry if it doesn't rhyme." It
Yeah.
is poetry. It's your words on paper.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I move back and forth between them. I also I haven't done it recently, but over the years I've also written little haiku poems, which is a different kind of style altogether. Again, it's kind of free verse, but it's different. Yeah, I could appreciate all types, but this particular poem came together in about 24 to 48 hours. All I needed to do was think back on all kinds of Hollywood movies over the years and how there's this one individual who stands up against everybody and says, "We're going to do this," right? And I thought, no, that's not really how it works in real life. But I wish it was, but it's not. So anyway,
well, that's the whole story of Hollywood, right? It's fame, it's the limelight, it's not reality. And a lot of
yeah.
people look at Hollywood as reality, and it's not. And I think that's where we lose the perception of every day.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just pure entertainment, but there's kind of messages in there that a lot of people buy into that again can be profoundly false, and they take us in directions and believe it's kind of like we do believe that somebody like Jimmy Stewart is going to suddenly appear and going to rescue the town. Well, no, if we're going to rescue the town, that means everybody in the town needs to do the rescuing, not just waiting for one person to do it. So Hollywood sometimes in their messaging does actually take us away from the real solutions that we have to face.
I always tell that to my kids. Watch what the Hollywood is telling you and then question it because it's not facts.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So
there's
let's
been a real proliferation. I'm not, as a sociologist, I should actually look into this more, but it strikes me that there's an awful lot of movies and TV things over the last few years that are, again, with superheroes. These are people with extraordinary powers that somehow are going to come down and do something. But most of the big and important changes that have happened in the world have come about from fairly ordinary people,
Yep.
but who have had an idea and gone about with courage changing something, not waiting for a superhero to come with these extraordinary powers. And yet Hollywood keeps pumping out endless movies of this sort. So it is an interesting phenomenon.
Well, it makes me question, is there a species that we don't know about that is superheroes, like superpowers that walk among us that we're not paying attention to?
Yeah, and perhaps some of them are even poets.
Yep. Right? Well, let's get into the next one, Trevor.
Sure, and this is the last one of this book, but this one again is there's a couple of poems in here very much Canadian centered. I am a Canadian after all, so this one is called Canada's Border, and of course we've faced some real pronounced threats over the last year or so. So this one, Canada's Border. We have been long lulled by paeans of friendship, by slogans mellifluous of sharing an undefended border, of being, quotes, neighbors, friends, and partners, forgetting that we are who we are because we resisted the empire's entities to one day agree to be dissolved. And I think again that's a speaks for itself, but it's very much kind of the place that Canada's in. I think in the last year or so. So
So, what did poems that you've written, Trevor, what doors do you hope to open up?
which ones do I hope to which?
To open up. When people read the poetry, what feel do you want them to get from them?
Uh, I think as with any of my writing, but I hope they will concentrate on what is said in the poem itself and come away with it thoughtfully about it. Okay, what is the writer saying here? Is there something out of this that I can go away with that if it doesn't provide a solution, and I'm somewhat skeptical of just instant solutions, but it makes me think about things differently. So, for example, the poem about the pandemic, to think about how it progressed and how, in some cases, we didn't respond to it very well. So, think about how could we have responded better. The same with this poem, to think about what is Canada? How do we define Canada in the 21st century? Uh, because frankly, over many decades, many Canadians have said, well, we're a separate country, but we're really not very different from Americans, right? And I think that a lot of Canadians now in the last year have had to struggle with redefining who we are as Canadians, trying to find that kernel of something that says that, yeah, we share some similarities, especially if you're outside of Quebec, a language for the most part,
Yeah.
but there's differences as well. And so readers of any of these poems, I think, will come away, I hope, thinking about what has been stimulated to think about things in a different way. That would be my hope.
Well, Trevor, do you want to hold up the book so people can see the book that you've been reading from?
Yeah.
And kind of share a little
So
bit about the cover of it and all that, because I think it's really incredible, the colors and the flow of the.
yeah, this one. So this is War and Other Inconveniences. This one was the cover is basically you kind of can find the publisher found this online. There's a whole bunch of Getty images I think you can get just download. The other book, though, I have a very interesting story to tell about, and maybe you'll even sort of remember this from my book on the Elysian Fields last year. So this
Yeah.
is it here, and you may remember that the Tales from Beyond the Elysian Fields, the cover of that was from a painting of a friend of mine, Colleen Bacher. And so I was putting this book together just thematically. I wanted a picture that kind of looked out on a horizon again. And I thought, I wonder if Colleen again has a painting that I could use here. So uh, and this was it. I said, that is absolutely perfectly, because some of the poems are about travel, but it's kind of like you're sitting at a chair in a desert. Maybe this is the Mediterranean. Maybe it's looking out on the Aegean. Uh, and and of course, actually, a number of the poems are about Greece, which I absolutely love. So Colleen came up with it. I loved the cover. And so, yeah, Poetry Without Borders, and there it is, this particular book.
I like that one because it reminds me of sitting on a patio with a little
Yeah,
table, just
yeah.
looking out at the water.
Well, the only thing missing in this picture, I would suggest, is a nice glass of red wine.
And do you have a favorite red wine, Trevor?
The last few years, I sort of went from Europe down to South America, Argentina, Chile, and everything. But a few years back, I actually discovered Portuguese wines. And so of late, the last 2, 3 years, I will still buy others just to sample, but I am very high on Portuguese wines. They are very tasty and at a reasonable price as well. So and you can find them here. So
So what is it about the Portuguese wine? Is it smoother? Is it bitter?
it's it's not overly bitter, but it's not so smooth that you can't sort of taste a little bit of tannins in it.
Oh,
But it goes down very well. And this was an interesting thing because we've talked about my travels before. So about 3 years ago now, 3 years this summer, I went to Portugal, my wife and I, for a couple of weeks. And what I found there, because I'd already discovered Portuguese wines, and I found the same wines that I liked buying them here in Canada, I could find them in Portugal. And this told me something really interesting because quite often countries keep their very best wines in house and they will export at different prices different kinds of wines. And what I found was no, the wines I really liked were there in Portugal and you could buy them quite freely. So I thought, they're actually exporting their very best wines and again at a reasonable price. So, yeah.
oh, well, that's cool. See, you just never know where tea time takes you. We do poems, we do wine, we do pandemic, we do it all here.
And that's what I love about these shows. I'm quite fine with kind of going down rabbit holes or whatever.
I like rabbit holes. Miss Liz is a rabbit hole girl. So let's get into the second book, Trevor, and let's get some of those poems out.
Sure. So I've kind of I've got them actually numbered here. So let me find where did I start with this one? Oh, there's one. There's number one. Okay. This one is called The Sentry, and this is actually one of the poems that I had sort of sketched out, probably going back 35, 40 years. And I looked at it again and said, oh, with a little bit of reworking, I think this one works. So anyway, The Sentry. And this one rhymes again. In deepest dark he stands, beneath the musket sky. The silent streets, no far-off cry to flinch his stony hands. Quiet again, and at his post, the arch's door his eye watches over a passer-by like some protective ghost. Still wary, never growing older, always young, his post to guard. Gun in hand in shadow yard, he stands, the unknown soldier. It's kind of like you see like war memorials and you see these statues of these soldiers, and yet, this sentry was standing guard for us. And yeah, it was nice to rework this one, as I said.
From that one, when you read it, Trevor, I was getting an Flanders Field kind of feel to it.
Yeah. Well, and in some ways I could have, I suppose, slid this one into the other book, but because I had also started working on it so many years ago, and there's about 7, 8 poems in this collection that were poems I had started a long time ago, and I thought, no, I'll leave it in there with poems that I wrote when I was quite a bit younger. So
I really like the flow of that one because it brings in the protected ghost, you know, and the protected ghost is kind of like the veterans.
Yeah.
People kind of ghost them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And memory. I mean, we go, well, every November 11th, we go back to think about and give thanks to people who gave their lives for the kind of world that we have and hope to have in future. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that one. Let's get into the next one. I think I have Spelling Bee for number 2.
The Spelling Bee Champion. And this one, again, a bit of a wry sense of humor. This one, sadly enough, is actually taken from a real incident. And in my notes of many years ago, I had clipped a little story out of a newspaper, a tragedy for sure. And there was this small little newspaper story among all my notes. And I thought, okay, I think I can do something with this tragic story. So the Texas crowd was hushed. The spelling bee was tied. Jimmy's father, mother, sister, all watched with nervous pride. Though not yet in his teens, little Jimmy had the stuff. No polysyllabic word too tricky, no arcane word too tough. He'd stared down every rival, watched them wither in their stead, like a vengeful Bible prophet, leave them silent, broken, dead. The final contest word was spoken. Young Jimmy spelled it out. Victory his, weeping cheers, the champion came a shout. Jimmy's father hurried home, but when they got inside, Jimmy grabbed his father's gun and spelled familicide. It's a very tragic story, but written in a kind of, and based on a true story, apparently, in Texas, many years ago.
See, when I got the spelling bee, I thought we were going to do like a spelling bee kind of contest. You see how the titles kind of make you look at a different angle?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, this tragic story of this young man who is celebrated for this. And yet, who knows, because you can read inside it, what pressures did he face? What was going on in the family that all of a sudden what should be a moment of celebration ends up in a horrific incident. Yeah, and sometimes I think poems stick with you and stay with you when they actually have that kind of double edge to them. Like you're suddenly all of a sudden how you understood the poem suddenly is flipped around in a different kind of way to think about it, right? So yeah.
Well, it's kind of short and sweet, right? So it's easy. It's easier to remember.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Let's get into the next one.
Okay. Now this one again rhymes, and I guess if there's a difference between the other book and this, there's more poems in this one that actually do rhyme. I was in Victoria this past spring. I went out to visit some good friends out there for just a few days. And as I was walking by the marina, I saw this boat, and the name of the boat was Poem. And maybe someone, if they're listening from Victoria, will say, hey, I recognize that boat. Anyway, so I wrote this poem about Poem. The stout wooden ship snuggled in its home, gently rolled against the wharf, tethered not to roam. I asked, what is your chosen name? It said, I am the Poem, an elegy for restless sailors anchored safe at home.
Oh, I like that one. It's got a nice flow, just like on the
Yeah,
boat.
yeah,
The
it's
flow on the
very kind
boat.
of rhythmic. And again, this one I probably wrote in one day. I'm walking along the wharf and I see this boat and I thought, what a great name. And then yeah, it just came to me. It's funny how poems sometimes write themselves. So,
Who knows? Maybe the owner of the poem is listening to Tea Time.
hey, if they are and they want to contact me, I'll send them a free copy of the book.
Let's get on to the next one, Trevor.
Sure. So I'll find let's see. I think the next one I have here is, oh, this is the one about Anthony Bourdain. Of course, travel writer. And again, this is a melancholy poem because it's trying to get inside the heart and mind of Anthony Bourdain, who I think a lot of us really enjoyed watching in his shows, but eventually, of course, ends up suiciding. Bourdain, so it starts out with a quote from Bourdain, actually. To sit alone or with a few friends, half drunk under a full moon, you just understand how lucky you are. It's a story you can't tell. It's a story you almost by definition can't share. I've learned in real time to look at those things and realize I just had a really good moment. And apparently, this was a quote from his last interview. So here's the poem. Hanoi to Hong Kong, Barcelona to Berlin. The long road stretched forever, but not home. He told others' tales, but not his own. No subterranean city depths ran so silent deep as the demon fears and loneliness that stalked his wake and sleep. No fine cuisine of lobster crepe or coq au vin or slow-baked sole could satiate or give escape or fill the gaping hole. No bourbon, weed, or wine could drown his silent fears, could scurry off the Paris night of pain and haunted tears.
Ooh, I like the flow of that one too. So, how long did it take to write that one, Trevor?
Uh, all these last poems were more recent in the last couple of years or so. That one again, I had an inkling of what I wanted to write because I really enjoyed Bourdain. He was one of these people I thought I'd love to sit down and meet. And sometimes people on television, you say, I don't care. But he would have been into it because he had a depth to him. So I think I probably wrote this from start to finish over about 3 or 4 days. I had kind of the kernel of it. The hardest part of actually writing it was, first of all, I wanted to get cities that were alliterative, so Barcelona to Berlin and everything.
Yep.
And then actually, because he wrote about food a lot, I needed words for types of food because I knew I wanted it to rhyme, so I had to have some kind of foods that I could fit into the rhyme scheme. But probably altogether about 4 days or so working on it, and on again, off again. I don't punish myself writing poems. If something isn't working right away, I go off and do something else.
Well, I like that you mentioned that you would like to talk to him, and meet him, because there are certain people I'd like to sit and have a conversation with too, and just kind of pick their brains and understand why they do what they do.
Yeah. Well, and he and again, yeah, there's a few people you can think of who you'd be comfortable with. It would be just a nice conversation, kind of like this, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to, you're either being lectured or hectored
Yeah, you're not a
or
drill sergeant.
yeah, or the person is so narrowly into their interests that that's all they want to talk about, as opposed to being a full-fledged human being. And he struck me as being a full-fledged human being who'd be just interesting to be with. So
Well, you never know the future. Put it out in the universe and things happen. That's how it works for Miss Liz. I just put it out there and it happens.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So, Trevor, the next one I have here is sparrows. Is that about birds?
Yeah, this is where is it here? Yeah, there, I got it. This is actually it's one section of a poem. So the whole poem is actually called Naxos, which is the largest uh, island in the Cycladic chain of islands in Greece. So I wrote like six short little poems about Naxos, but this is one of the ones that appears among those six, and it's called Sparrows. And again, this one nicely rhymes, and this one came about. I'll just give a preamble first. My wife and I were back on Naxos. We've been there several times. I love it. I love the Greek people. Um, and it might have been about a year and a half ago, 2 years anyway. And at night, as sun has set, and anyway, the sparrows come out. They just flock around, and we look up at this tree, and it's just hundreds and hundreds of sparrows are just flying around. So anyway, here's the poem. Eventide, a spray of sparrows darts the narrowing autumn sky, in treetops gossiping, darkly heralding nighttime's fall and winter nigh. It was actually in the fall, and so winter was going to come on. But all these sparrows were just doing these crazy things, just flying around and twittering up there. It was absolutely the most beautiful music you can imagine. So,
Sparrows are beautiful birds that we
yeah,
don't talk about enough. Let's get into George's Hotel.
sure. This one is a personal story about a hotel and also a young woman that I met when I was there in 1983, over a brief period of time. George's Hotel. Dominique, where are you? Even now, past many years, Athica's moon silhouettes your slender body, racing over rain-kissed stones to the hotel's marble steps, to the oak stairwell and the hallway floor. Fingers of light pierce the faded curtains, caress our naked bodies, far from prying eyes, far from the slipping night, until the morning ship took you to it was. This the sterile offices of brokers and lawyers. All was gone, as were you. So I initially met Dominique in 1983, but I was back in Athens. I've been there several times, but I went looking for this hotel when I was back in 2017, and I found the address. I found the street. That was easy enough. No George's Hotel. So everything's been changed. So anyway, only a reminisce, only something in my memory banks.
So, Trevor, you've never met this person again?
No, no, it's like, uh, and as you get older, at least for me, you sometimes think back on people you met. It might have been transitory, or in some cases, maybe you knew them for a longer period of time, and they just suddenly disappear, and you get to thinking about, I wish I could go back, or I wish I could just meet those people again. as an update or a reminder of the memory or something. You'd like to go back to that. So yeah.
Yeah, and like where have they gone? What has
Yeah.
happened? If they got married, if they had kids, all of
Yeah.
that good stuff, right?
You hope it was a good life afterwards, but it's kind of out there. You just will never know. So all you can do is think about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Trevor, let's get into the last one. It's called December.
Yeah. December. I didn't realize how many here actually rhymed in this particular book until just now. December. Wintry trees against the sky, branches barren, background gray, magpies mocking, seagulls squawking, mourn the old, the dying day. Yet born beneath the winter's ground, small shoots of growth unseen, hiding till the next year's crowned in garlands red and green.
There is a lot of rhyming in this one, eh?
Yeah, yeah. And maybe besides, as I said, it's kind of introspective, but I think that was the other thing that was a bit different in this book of poetry was that there was a preponderance more of rhythm and rhyme as opposed to in the other book, which was more free verse and unrhymed. Yeah.
I like the flow of both books. And
Thank you. Thank you.
and I think poetry is coming back. I'm seeing a lot more poetry. Is this the first time that you've read your poetry online, Trevor?
I've had occasion just in the last little while because of these books that I have read some of them. This is the most extensive, and I thank you for that. It's really nice to be able to cover such a range of poems from both books. Um, but otherwise, yeah, it's been a really interesting experience, and I hope to keep doing it more, as well as doing some live readings over the next little while in front of audiences as well.
So, Trevor, we had a question that came in, and it says, "In war and other inconveniences, how do you balance gravity with humanity?"
Yeah, the as I said, my at the beginning, the introduction, I emphasized the need for actual truth, or truth as the writer sees it, at least, and not shying away from things. That as hard as sometimes things are, uh, to face up to that, but also to try to find the humanity within it. So even when there are some dark moments, how do we get through that to touch the essential heart of humanity, right? And I think that's the key thing. You need to be, first of all, it seems to me, alerted to the fact that there's something wrong and dark and dangerous and awful here, but you need to struggle through that rather than ignore it. Goes back to one of the earlier poems I read, and search for that heart of humanity that is there in order to try to make a better world. So I don't think that gravity and humanity, or the heart of it, is necessarily separate.
Well, Trevor, before we wrap up, I want to get into your tea, and the tea that you gave me was travel, writing, and creativity. Why those three words?
Yeah, I think they fit me really well. The I sort of wrote about this actually in my book last year, Beyond the Elysian Fields, that when I was my late teens, I sort of already knew what I wanted to do. It's just that I didn't have the capabilities to do it. I just had this dream, right? I like the idea of travel. I like the idea of writing and expressing myself in all kinds of ways. And so the three things for me come together. I find travel is actually a place that stimulates me to think about the world differently and to think about people too. I love people's stories and I love to listen to those stories. That's why I think Bourdain and I would have actually had wonderful conversations because I do like people's stories, but everybody has their own story. And to meet them on their own ground in some other place, and then come out of that and say, hey, I've got to, as best I can, record what their story was So if they can't speak for themselves, I can hope to speak for them to other people so they get to know them. And that to me is really the essence of the kind of writing and travel I like to do.
So, Trevor, one word the world needs more of today.
Uh, Connection, understanding. Uh, Again, that's why I think I emphasize the importance of travel. That unfortunately now a lot of people are afraid of travel. They get kind of locked into their neighborhoods or their, isolated communities. I think if people traveled more and got to recognize and know and connect with people on a human level, that many of the troubles we have might go a ways towards being solved. One thing when you actually meet people on an equal level and you recognize that essentially they share human qualities with us, it becomes much more difficult for nefarious individuals, politicians or otherwise, to scare you and convince you that the other people out there are somehow different, right? That they're dangerous. And the only way to escape that is to actually go out and get to know them, to meet them in some fashion. So that's again why I'm such a proponent of travel, but also reading about other people as well.
Well, and that's why I enjoy having a global platform, because then I get to see the different cultures and
Yeah,
perspectives of the world, right? Not
yeah.
just one perspective of Canadian outlook on life. You get to see all across the globe.
Well, and if there's one thing I said before about Canadians rediscovering who Canadians are, who it is that makes us different, Canadians actually are really good travelers, always have been. We actually have a really high proportion of people who have passports, which is not necessarily the case in a lot of other countries. And it's almost like a rite of passage at 18, Canadians want to get a passport. And the idea of going out there to travel, maybe as a tourist, maybe because you want to trade, you want to do business, whatever. But Canadians historically have been really good at that. And I think it is a marked part of our identity that we feel that we can be part of a global community.
So, Trevor, do you have any new books coming out in 2026 besides these two poetry books?
Yeah, actually, I have another book coming out, and it's more of an academic one in some ways. It's called Safarnameh, and which is actually a Urdu or Farsi word for journey. And it's a book about my travels across along the so-called hippie trail back in the late 1970s, just before the Iranian Revolution, actually. And it's an interesting blend. It's taken a long time to get it right, but it's supposed to be out probably in March or maybe April with Athabasca University Press. And it combines, I had an extensive amount of personal notes as I made a trip across Turkey through Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India over about a year. So I've got my personal notes, but as an academic, it also has a lot of detail about what was happening in those countries and kind of historically and politically, so people have a sense of the places I went through. So it's kind of a blend of academia and personal recollections of this time, and what I went through and the experiences, much of which I have to say actually probably again influenced my career afterwards as an academic. I mean, traveling through those countries because I had not yet been to university. So that experience was kind of seminal in me actually taking on an academic career later.
So, Trevor, if anybody want to reach out to you to have them on their podcast or to reach out for readings or anything like that, where could they reach you?
Well, they can get hold of me directly through my email address. That's trevor.harrison at ULETH, that's short for University Lethbridge.ca. You can find me also on Facebook. And as you know, Liz, I also have a publicity agent, Mickey Mickelson, who has been booking any number of these wonderful conversations. And so people can get hold of me. And I love to talk to readers, listeners, people just want to talk to me about anything, I'm willing to meet with fans and people in the audience.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to do a wrap up of what today's tea time was, and then I will let you get back to your writing and all that good stuff. But I want to just, Trevor, thank you for sharing your words with us today. What poetry reminds us in this borders and are not only drawn on maps, and wars are not always fought loudly. Sometimes they live quietly within us. To everyone listening, I invite you to reflect. What inner borders are you ready to cross? What life inconveniences has shaped you into who you are becoming? Your story, like poetry, deserves space. Until next time, keep honoring your voice and the truth it carries. And I'll see everybody at 7 p.m. with the second tea time, and we'll do some house flipping tonight.